Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Gentian's weekly webcast. We're going to refer to this as the GWW, Gentian's weekly webcast. So remember that. Another acronym, another thing we all need. We enjoy seeing you. We're glad to be here. We're grateful to be here. A couple of things I want to do at the beginning, a little bit different. You know we usually go big, so we're not going to make anything different than our normal programs. I want you to start by taking out your Gentian Gratitude Journal. I'm sure it's sitting right next to all of you, and you use it daily. So, what I'd like to do here, if you don't have this, even grab a piece of paper or a pencil, and actually do this if you may. I've got a question for you. So take a moment to open that up, and I want you to write 3 questions that you would love to ask yourself 10 years from now about now. So in other words, we're going through history right now. Write yourself 3 questions. 3 questions that I've written, just to give you a seed or a sample, are: how did you feel during that time? What emotions did I go through? Another one is, what was important to me that I didn't know was important? And I flip the same question is, what was more important that I thought during this crisis than I thought before? So you want to flip both of those. What was important beforehand, and actually during it, what wasn't important at all? So things that you thought were very important. The third one is, how did you get over this fear and return to normal? So those 3 questions are 3 important questions. And by the way, if you can answer the last one today, you're giving yourself an idea of when the economy reopens what you're going to do. And we've been talking to a lot of you this last week about things opening up. There was a picture just after our webcast on Wednesday that was taken at, I think, a bar in Appleton that was sent around the nation. So the last thing that the nation needed was more ammunition that Wisconsinites live in bars. But according to last week, when you saw that, that's what people saw. Oh man, as soon as the bars were open, 10 minutes after that Supreme Court decision, everybody ran to the bars and they went in packed side to side. I think Ken and I saw a few of you guys in there as well, didn't we, Ken?
We did.
We thought we did anyway. I know you said you didn't. One of my clients said, no, that wasn't me, but man, alive, people were trampling over my fingers and all, and I was trying to get out. So at any rate, that was a couple different things. But coming back to this, I just want to make sure those 3 questions are super important. Obviously, go ahead and write down what you're grateful for. But those 3 questions, I think, give you that ability to help yourself get through this. A couple of things we're going to do, and today, again, we've got our 6 major aspects of what we'll talk about here: markets, ideology, mindset, some planning ideas, and then kind of a summary. But really what we wanted to do today's about reopening. What does that really mean to everybody? What is the mindset that goes with it as well? So we'll give you some of the facts about what's going on in the market now, the questions we're getting, but that's a big one. What does it look like? And we're still determining our own process for it. 2 things we've looked at. One is, there's a company I'm going to tell you about in a bit called Surficide. One of our clients' sons, Jeff Veenheis, owns, and we're going to show you a video clip on our website if they allow it. We're going to connect that to the follow-up from this so you can see that piece. But basically it goes in with ultraviolet light and cleans both hospitals, Children's Hospital and Froedtert. And it's actually all around the nation as well. So cool stuff like that. We're looking into things like, how about that? Is that viable here? And also there's a scanner, a video monitor when you walk in that actually tells your temperature as well. So are these things that are going to make sense here? What are going to make you feel comfortable? We're not prepared to open here and have live conversations. We have had a few requests until we're certain that this is not an environment with which you can get COVID. And many of you have enjoyed or been very receptive to, in your adaptability quotient very high on doing the Zoom meetings. So we completely appreciate that. And that's one thing we're extremely grateful for, is the relationship and conversation we've been able to promote through Zoom and the conversations we've been having there on our meetings. I know Ken echoes that as well.
Absolutely.
We share those every day, and it's thank you tremendously for that piece as well. A couple of housekeeping items. This is for Ashley and Peter. But one, keep an eye out for questionnaires. Now, here's one thing I want to do. We know that one of the important things is knowing you well. For some of you, we've known you for 20 years, and we assume certain things about you. We're going to send out a questionnaire to get to know you better again. What we want to do is understand you. There's a section that has a bunch of questions we have, and a section you can write something else that you'd like us to know about you that's interesting. So we'll start out with, I'll share some of mine as well as we go through. Ken will share his. Each one of our teammates will share them with you, because I think what's important is, in order for us to have a deeper relationship, you knowing who we are, what's important to us knowing the same about you, is extremely important. So usually get to know is just at the beginning of a relationship. I actually want to have it during our relationship as well, because sometimes those are the best times to tell each other what's going on, who we are, how we can help each other, how we feel appreciated. So you'll see some of those questionnaires coming up. They're going to be coming out in waves, so we'll be doing 50 or so at a time, not to inundate both you or us with responses, but take a moment to fill that out if you will. I know we're getting to the end of the COVID time frame of being locked at home for some, but for a lot of our clients, that's not going to be the case talking to them. They're going to want to see pure evidence of when that happens. So please keep an eye out for that questionnaire coming out. The second one is save the date for the Gentian Women's Virtual Group. We had a bunch of great feedback, but coming up Friday, May 29th, that's a week from this Friday at 11 a.m., women of Gentian are going to join on a big Zoom call, and what happens, they'll do some breakout rooms, some other cool stuff. I have nothing to do with it. It's the women at Gentian. It's also yourself as well. And really had phenomenal feedback from the clients I've been talking to who were on it. They were hesitant at first, but the second time they go, this is going to be fun because now I know what to expect. So please hop on that if you'd like, if you've got some time. It's a great way to connect and talk about different ideas. Remember also, all past webinars are on gentianfinancial.com. So one thing we've had a lot of questions about is this information that we're doing. Is it just for us? And the answer is, it's intended for you, but not just for you. So you've got kids who'd love to hear this. Feel free to share the link. Here's the one thing we say. If we're going to take the time to put out great information for you and for those you love in your community, feel free. They don't have to be a client. They don't have to feel compelled to become a client. If it's great information and it spreads and it helps, we are all for it. So this doesn't just have to be for our community here. And I've had 5 or 6 questions about that I've answered. So I thought I'd answer this as well. This is intended to be an outreach and a help to everyone. There's certain things we're talking about to you just as clients, but there's also incredible things we're doing and planning others that others need to hear about because they're not being told that. So we'll take a look at that as well on this as well. We're also going to be doing, this is kind of a prescient forward thing, some pieces on mental health. We're going to have a program on mental health, have some mental health guests. Also probably have Dr. Gladden back as well and talk about how do we stay physically healthy when we're re-emerging into this environment as well. So we want to put some things together that are going to be helpful to you that you can get in those 30-minute, or maybe if it's even longer, a 1-hour chunk, but you can read them anytime as well. So we know it's about a life. We want to provide you with some great resources that can help you with those as well. I always like to start with something funny. So I know we've talked a lot about Amazon, and they've really been some incredible, I think some of my neighbors are actually helping the economy tremendously as ordering things, but I just want to ask you a question. Do you know what you call 2 monkeys who share the same Amazon account? Primates. I know you're laughing, and if not, you're probably laughing now. Another one.
And if you aren't laughing, you ought to.
Yeah, you ought to be laughing. That's what I got to say as well. I ought to say that often. That's a good point, Ken. Thank you. There's one thing today, it's about auto. Okay, so we ought to be doing something. The next one is this. You guys, I've seen a lot of people, when I go out and it's a sunny day like this, everybody's walking their dogs. But I have a really tough time because every time I walk my dog, the ducks keep biting him. I guess that's what you get when you buy a purebred dog. Again, you ought to be laughing at that one.
You ought to be laughing at that.
Yes.
All right, Chris, if you're going to tell a joke, I'll tell one here.
Please.
So, with the webinars, with church service and things of that nature, and during church service at our house, my son, my 3-year-old, is usually running around like Batman during this time frame. So, here's the joke. What do you call it when Batman skips church? Christian Bale.
That's good stuff. So if you appreciate the jokes or if you don't, we're really not that concerned. We just want to throw them out there for you so you can use them as your original jokes to your children and grandchildren. So a couple of my clients have already told me I've used those, by the way. In that vein as well, I did want to tell you about Surfacide. That's my client's son's company. So it's Jeff Veenheis. The company's truly cleaning up. You're going to see some cool things. We'll put some pieces out about that as well. Also this week, one of my clients said they came back from Florida to Wisconsin just about a week and a half ago. But what they decided to do was to keep the Eastern time frame and keep the Eastern time zone when they got back here, predominantly so they could start their cocktail hour an hour earlier. So if you're coming back from Florida or someone else, you're being inventive. I said as long as cocktail hour starts sometime after 11 a.m., you're probably fine. So I want to give you one quick statement, too, about the environment that we're in. It's really something we ought to be thinking about. Words are very important, but in this environment that we're in a very high, strongly regulated environment. So sometimes what we say may seem kind of nebulous, But there are literally certain words we can't use. I'm going to say a whole list of them right now. We can't say promise, no, I'm just joking. I'm not going to go through them all. But the whole point is, some of the things that we say, when we use specifics, when you're on the webcast, you may hear them. When you see the video recording, you won't. We're really working on the things we can and can't say because it's a highly regulated environment. Like, I can't refer to a tree because people may assume that means growth. There's different odd things like that, but that's what our environment is. So when we're speaking here, it becomes very difficult to say very pointed, direct, important things because we have to watch out for what's going to be edited out. So I want to make sure you know that. When we're talking, we actually have to be careful about what we're saying, and that's why sometimes what we say is nebulous. So I guess an ideal statement would be this. Hello, this is Chris and Ken from Gentian Financial. Good night. That would be an ideal program. They can't really argue with any of that. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you very much for compliance. They keep us all safe, and they're really doing what they can to help us keep the business and keep you safe from any kind of crazy words. But I just wanted to give you that piece on the environment as well. We go into mindsets and perspective. This is something that we like to talk about as well. And, there's a lot of resilience going on here. I know that this week with allergies and the rain and 5 and 6 inches of rain, I hope you have a dry basement. But what's interesting about this, too, it makes it tough for that resilience, tough to feel like really excited when it's 50 degrees and raining outside for 3 days in a row. And I know that this May seems to be this early kind of spring cold weather has pushed all the way into what we normally feel as early summer, here in Wisconsin anyway. So I know it's been kind of tough, but I want to say this. Do you ever want to put a sign on your chest or on your head that says, fragile, handle with care? It's kind of good to let people know that from time to time because, we sometimes send our parcels and they say, handle with care. Why don't we do that with people? There's some days when you're not feeling quite right and if somebody provokes you, you're going to fire up. It'd be great to have a little sign that was on there saying, fragile, handle with care. That's the kind of time we're in now. We're getting a bit long in the tooth. We can have some jocularity and some fun, but I think it's actually an important time to make sure we're watching for those signs because there's a lot of people out there who are anxious. As the world opens up, they see people going out. Our clients will not be. They'll probably be waiting. But I think we've got a couple of camps here, as Ken was saying. You're saying 2 different camps of our clients, right?
I think there's 2 different camps that are out there, not necessarily just our clients, but I think in people in general. As you talk to some of your friends or people or acquaintances that you have, that some people are ready to jump back into this. And you take a movie theater, for example. Everybody loves the popcorn. They go for the popcorn, I think, instead of the movie. But the whole point of it is
True.
Some people are going to be really comfortable being 6 or 7 seats away from somebody, but still at the movie theater. Some people won't even enter the movie theater. So there's really 2 camps of people that we're seeing, as evidenced by the picture that Chris was talking about with the bar scene. A lot of people think that was kind of goofy that those people were doing that. But again, there's two camps out there. Not everyone is like us. Not everyone is going to be cautious and protective of our health as well.
That's true. And Ken, you were saying something about retreat and passions. Do you have a couple statements on that from the mindset?
Well, I thought it was interesting. As I talked to a lot of you, you have your go-to place. You have your retreat that makes you feel the best. Sometimes it's at home. Sometimes it's up north. Sometimes it's down at your home in Florida or Arizona or wherever you are. It's one of those things just to kind of sit back and relax. Where are we most comfortable? Where are we at our best? What brings us the most joy? Another topic on this is what have you missed the most, kind of like what Chris was saying, that you haven't been able to do that really brings a lot of joy to you and your family. Mm-hmm. And for me, my dad actually hosts a dart party. And we get together and we actually have a competition and almost like a tournament as we pair up with people and we play darts. That hasn't happened. And that was more of a tradition that hasn't happened in the last 3 or 4 months. And so that's something that we miss as we talk about traditions with families. I would love to hear from you when we talk to you. What are some of the things that have been very traditional for you and your families that we haven't had a chance to do yet as well?
And more important, what's cool with that is also how did you adapt those? A lot of you have family traditions that you've adapted. So for instance, family graduation traditions, there's people who built a stage in their driveway for their daughter to walk across for graduation. Homestead is having their graduation July 19th at Miller Park so they can spread out tremendously. There's really cool adaptations going on now. So that's the cool thing about humanity. What we do is we adapt. So we're not going to let this thing beat us. We're going to beat it. So that's some of the things we've looked at as well. Another one that I said, and this is a great point Ken said on passions and where you feel comfortable with retreat. One of the top salespeople I met in California had done this. He found the age with which he was most confident, most carefree, and it brought the most joy, and he found it was about 26 years old. He went back and took 20 songs from that point in time, and he put them on a playlist, and every morning on his commute, he plays those songs. And what it does for him, it energizes him, it gets him up, because I'm sure there's a song for you. I know some of you ought to have these song lists. Some of you as well. I know love Willie Nelson, the Grateful Dead. Some of you. It's a great time to find those songs and play them. We've been watching a show called Songland. One of the songs was called Drinking Beer on a Champagne Night. We saw a person walk in, they morphed this song, and last night it was on The Voice. I think the Lady Antebellum sang it, and it's like a #1 hit or something like that. It's really cool to watch some of those kind of things. But what passion do you have with that? That's a great point, Ken.
Yeah,
Thanks
when
for
you go
sharing that.
back, I was just talking to one of our centers of influence. He's a tax accountant, and we were kind of talking about, back in time, what brings us, some of that joy and some of the memories that we have back then. And we were talking about Michael Jackson actually came up, and we were talking about that. And I remember having a silver boombox. You guys remember boom boxes? Mm-hmm. I had a silver boom box I would carry around. We would listen to Michael Jackson and Vanilla Ice. And those are some interesting times. Love to hear what some of the things that you remember and some of the unique things that you did during your time as well. So it just brings back really good memories. And if it doesn't, maybe it ought to.
That's true. So one of the things I'd like to do is we all need to have some peace in our life, right? So I like to give you a piece of who I am. Actually, I'm just going to share this with you. So people that I looked up to that gave me energy were Michael Jordan. I'm 6'6". I played a lot of basketball, played other things. But Michael Jordan was one. The band Rush was extremely important to me as well. The lyrics, as you read them, are a bit different. Dave Matthews over time as well with your musicianship. So I've just looked at things that energize myself, and those make a big, big difference. The world right now needs joy, and the more you can add to it, the better. I know you don't feel that way all the time, but what you can do to get there and add to it is extremely important. So just as an FYI, that's a big part. Now the next portion we want to go into is the markets again. And looking at the markets is kind of interesting. This is a great statement. The U.S. has to be reopened. The conversation is a very strong debate on how that needs to happen. You saw what happened Wednesday night. Bars open, people crowded into them. Some of the bars, though, there was only 2 or 3 people showing up. That's what happened in Georgia when they opened up a few weeks ago. So following the data that what happens after this opens is going to be fairly important. One of the health things is vitamin D. Getting out in the sun for 15 to 20 minutes, showing as much skin as you can in that, is extremely important because that's how you get a ton of vitamin D in yourself, and that's really strong. They're finding those who have been catching the virus are extremely low in vitamin D. So a very interesting part as well as you run through. But as this reopens, and this is something Ken and I and the team have been talking about, what is my role? Is my role to be the leader? Is my role to be safe and cautious? Here at the firm, we're choosing to be cautious because of you. We care about you. You're number one. If it means an extra few weeks of doing what we're doing, the first thing we'll do is be bringing Zach back to the office. We'll see how things go with numbers. We can all isolate dramatically in different places here, which is perfect. But once we do that, what would be our first meeting? Where would it be? Would it be outside? Would it be on a porch? Would it be this or that? When do we accept that? So we need to see more data on it, but we're putting a plan together that's going to be somewhat loose-knit. But that's really for protection for you in this as well. The next one is, there's a lot of you said this, and Ken and I were talking recently about this just yesterday and this morning. How do I remain safe? Yet have I talked to anyone who goes, yep, Chris, I'm heading out. I'm going to do this. I'm shopping. I'm going to go to all the stores. Not a single person. They go, no, I'm not going to change anything until I start to see that there's some data. So one thing I want to do is kind of liken this, and a gentleman likened this to, it's kind of like there's a swimming pool and there's a Baby Ruth in it. For those of you who know Caddyshack, you know what that means. For those of you who have kids, you also know what that means. But the Baby Ruth in the pool is kind of what's happened here. So when the Baby Ruth is in the pool, everybody jumps out, right? Oh my gosh, I got to jump out. I'm not going back in. But some people say it's okay to swim with Baby Ruth in the pool because it strengthens your immune system. So stay in there. And then other people are like, I'm never going back into that pool. Well, it's 95 degrees and you want to get back in. At what point do you get back in? They shock the pool. What steps have they taken for you to get back in? But it's a lot like what's happening right now. I really want to get in that pool, but I'm not getting in that pool after that. Who's the first one in? And how did they fare? And who's the next one in? So it's an interesting view and story about this, but we really have to look at that. What makes you get back in the pool? Okay? So I know it's a bit crude and all, but I think it's a kind of a funny alliteration, and it brings it to reality going, yeah, you're right. That's true. Some of the different keys is volatility is prevailing still. You saw a couple of percentage points down last week, and then this week on Monday we saw a 4% day out of the blue. Today it's up 400 points, but it's, again, we're seeing that volatility because of this debate back and forth. Here's what's interesting. The experts are debating. I see experts who go, oh, the market's up way too far too fast. Let me make a statement. You cannot argue with what is. What is. You can't argue with that. The market is exactly where it should be, because that's what we are feeling, we're expecting, our hopes and inspirations are there. 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, you saw our fears rampant. It's down way too fast. Well, so there's all this arguing back and forth, and people are in both camps. Oh, it's way too far too fast, and others are, it could really fly up from here. So again, just be careful of that. You're going to see a lot of that. It's a lot of noise, and it's interesting because remember, there still are no future facts. There could be another downturn in this market, or there may not be. We don't know. We're okay with that. We've positioned ourselves to make sure we're prepared for either direction. That's what we do for scenario planning. So that's an important piece that we've come up with. How about Ken? How about you have some interesting facts on the market?
Yeah, some facts. When Chris talks about you never know, there's no future facts. We never know what's going to happen. What's interesting though is if you look a year back, if you go back a year and look at some of where the Treasury rates are, no one really thought that Treasury rates could go lower. They were already historically low at that point in time. A year ago, the 2-year Treasury was at 2.16. Today, it's at 0.16. 10-year Treasury, 2.37. 0.64% today. Again, why is that important? Because no one predicted that. No one saw that coming. No one saw 30-year mortgages dipping into the 2s right now. Everybody was refinancing at 3.5, 4. Thought that was a great rate from 5 and 6. Here we are, 30-year jumbos potentially at 3.5. 30-year mortgages in the 2s, like I mentioned. No one saw this coming. What's interesting, though, is when you look at the different sectors of the market, small companies on the value side, I'm talking in generality right now across the board, have been affected the most. Mm-hmm. Large companies on the growth side have held up very, very well. I don't think anybody predicted that one as well, but you look at which companies are in there, and it kind of makes sense. Stocks are still on sale. We talked about this. Mm-hmm. Again, they're not near their highs right now where we were. It kind of relates to, stocks don't always go on sale, but when they do, we need to be there for them. Think of a product or a service that you subscribe to that rarely goes on sale. But it's great quality, you wish it would go on sale more, but it never really does. But when it does, you go out and buy a lot of it. For me, it's steel products, STIHL. They do chainsaws, backpack sprayers, stuff like that. They never go on sale. But when they do, you rush out and get them. That should be the same for stocks as well. We don't know where the bottom is, we don't know where the top is, but when stocks are on sale, it's time to buy them. There's no perfect time to do that, but this crisis won't last forever either.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on Ken. That's awesome. So one thing about experts Ken mentioned on interest rates, and this one is the source is Barron's on this one, and we'll give you some data. So we've talked about this. I've done some studies on experts in the past. Let me give you a very recent one. So every year they look to ask a huge panel of experts to just guess the base interest rate. And this year they guessed the base interest rate as of 12/31, so it's right at the new year. They guessed that the 10-year or the 10 predictions range from as low as 1.5 to a high of 2.2%. Just to let you know where those 10-year treasuries are right now, they're at 0.64. Nobody even in the ballpark. So it's interesting, even when you ask experts to give their best prediction, there's no future facts. We don't know exactly what will happen, nor will they. I think the interesting and frustrating thing is to get rid of frustration, don't argue with what is. So for instance, it's sunny outside. You can argue all day long to tell me it's cloudy and raining. It's just not true. You can't argue with what is, so be careful about that. What is. And you want to make sure that a lot of frustration can be separated by just saying, okay, that is what it is, and we can move on. So I just wanted to share that piece as well. When it comes to planning here, we'll do a couple of quick pieces on planning. Securities-based lending is something we've talked with a lot of clients about. We'll talk a bit more about that with you. For those who have a taxable account, it's an available thing here that you can actually get a loan based on your securities, and it doesn't go off a credit report, doesn't show on your credit report as well. So if you have a taxable account that's, say, $50,000 or $100,000 or more, that's not an IRA, not a Roth IRA. There's something that Raymond James Bank offers called securities-based lending that we'll go through and talk a little bit more about, and a piece that we'll send out in the next week or two as well. So some of you already have it, and it's been needs-based. Not everybody should have it, but maybe having that open as a source to be able to pull from is a nice source. Ken, how about some of the planning ideas as well?
Some of the planning ideas, I'll go through this quickly. I know we're kind of approaching that half-hour mark, but when we look at the two acts that were passed, sometimes we're getting these mixed up a little bit in conversation. There's a Secure Act that happened last year, then there's the CARES Act that happened this year in response to the coronavirus. The Secure Act last year basically did two things in a nutshell. It moved the required minimum distributions back to the age of 72. Used to be 70 and a half, moved it back to 72. The second part of it, what it really did that affects our planning that we're doing together and the conversations we're having, is about the beneficiary planning. Used to be, if someone inherited an IRA, they could spread it over their lifetime. Not the case anymore. It has that 10-year provision where the account has to be emptied in the 10th year. So those are the highlights from the Secure Act. The CARES Act, really what that did for all of us in some of our planning, there's quite a bit there, but the one that affects most of us on our planning that we're talking about is the waiver of the 2020 required minimum distribution, the RMD. It's been waived for your IRA and for any inherited IRA that you have as well. That's been waived as well. We're still getting a few questions on that, so we wanted to bring that piece up. So the Secure Act and the CARES Act. Another one that comes up is, where do we put short-term money? Where do we put our money market accounts? You look at some of the bigger banks in the Milwaukee area, you know who those are. They're not paying much at all. A client brought to my attention the other day, if we take a look at credit unions, they typically have a little higher rate. So not saying that's the right solution for anybody, but it's an observation of what we're seeing in the marketplace as far as credit unions versus the bigger banks. Seems like the bigger banks have better lending right now than the credit unions potentially, but the credit unions pay a little more on the short-term interest rates. Also, that's brick and mortar. There's also online banks like Capital One, Ally Financial, but some people are comfortable setting up an account virtually almost, and some people are not. So there's a preference there. We're seeing that as well. The other piece is colleges. We're kind of in that time frame where kids are applying for colleges right now. There's a great article by Forbes. It's called The Dawn of the Dead. It talks about private colleges. Some are not going to make this, not make it through this. Those that are larger, the wealthier colleges with the endowment funds, they'll make it through this, of course. But some won't. It's a very interesting article about how the coronavirus that came out of the blue, basically, is changing education. It's changing the thought process of some of our children, some of our grandkids. It's very interesting to see what will happen out of the educational space.
Yeah, and this is changing a lot of people. It's changing a lot of people's businesses. So how do you run a business that could prepare for a 30 or 40 or 50% drop in revenue? There's a lot of those things going on. Can you do that? Do you do that? You do it in retirement by owning stocks. So we've coached you to that point. So how can we do that in other businesses as well? And there's a bunch going on with that. In the landscapes that we're talking of. I think another thing that you want to take a look at, if you have any questions on the Safe Money questions, feel free to let us know. We can talk about those with you individually if you'd like as well. One of the interesting pieces that I find as well is when it comes to health, what can we do to prevent this, and what can we do to keep ourselves strong during this? A couple of different pieces that come out, and we've had a great conversation. It was with a Matt Kanzi. He was sponsored by Nationwide, but I think it's something that the team was on recently. And it's very interesting to find that today there's many with phase 1 vaccines. 70 other labs are working on vaccines, but there's one lab with a phase 1 vaccine. It has to get through phase 3 to be used, which is interesting. So there's a bit to go on these, but 70 are working on it. There's 15 to 20 preventions occurring as well, which are nasal sprays and others. So the whole community is kind of turned to fight this thing on a go-forward basis. They're finding that people with low vitamin D tend to be much more susceptible. This is a very important piece. Avoid exposure and contact to hand washing. Hand washing for 20 seconds. Hand sanitizer does destroy but does not remove. So the best thing to do is still wash hands. So the careful thing is when you have not been outside and not been outside of your environment, don't wash your hands on a consistent basis because you start to take the protective layer off your hands, and for those of you start to get cuticle and other dry aspects as well. Optimize sleep, stress reduction, and nourish your body and physically move throughout the day. So it's called rest, restore, and recover. We'll go through more of these as well, but I just want to give you a couple of highlights. Manage stress, get enough sleep. Don't watch the news on a constant 24-hour stream unless you're watching good news. Physical activity is important, I should say. This actually is, for some of you, going to be a bad idea, but You won't enjoy this, but it says avoid alcohol, sugary drinks, and refined grains and processed food. Remember, you are what you eat. Eat nutritional food, high on the Andy Index scale. So don't overhydrate, but also make sure you're hydrated. So there's a fine line there as well. Daily walks, you know a bunch of these different ideas, but we just wanted to put that together. We're going to go through more of this as we go through because we think your health and your true wealth are extremely important. We know money's a resource to support that. You know us. We'll talk more about that. The next program is going to be a bit more on behavioral finance and the process of what it is we do for financial planning for people as well, because there's some big things coming up on that you're going to see. So we're going to do some outlines on those pieces too. But we wanted to share those today. Before I close, Kenny, anything else you want to say?
I think there's an interesting piece. I read this one. And this is more of a pondering question of, would you do this? As we talk about the coronavirus, we talk about social distancing, we talk about airlines, we talk about traveling. What does that look like? Everyone's asking that question, what does that look like? Here's an interesting one. Would you pay more? So here it is. This is according to the International Air Transport Association, okay? Would you pay more if U.S. airlines were to stop booking the middle seats to achieve some sort of social distancing? Would you pay more for that? And what this is saying is that the U.S. airlines would have to increase tickets by 43%. So would you pay half more? Would you pay 150% of what your ticket's actually worth to have that middle seat open to the point where you'd have some of that social distancing? That's an interesting question to ponder. I'd like to hear some of your responses.
Another idea that I've had, this is just off the cuff, but another idea I had is travel suits. Why don't we get something called a travel suit? When you go out, when you go somewhere, will we be wearing something that looks like a hazmat suit when we travel, that has proper ventilators, has a face mask built into it, actually totally covered with us? Some of the kids you see who get on planes put their hoodie on and they cover it up. That actually may be how we travel. They may not have been wrong. So you're just looking at ways to protect it. I think we should not be we can't do it that way. Be open to the possibility that it could be. That's a great point, Ken. Way to bring that up. Thank you. So I want to share, I usually start with something funny. I'm going to end with a little something funny too, but I got to ask you a question. And this is a good one for a lot of you out there. You may know this, you may not know the difference, but what's the difference between a hippo and a Zippo? One is really heavy and one's a little lighter. Just so you know, again, a little bit of jocularity. So one thing you know, we're serious about our guidance and we're committed to you. One of the things, while wealth management is what we do, getting people through tough times and helping people make great decisions is who we are. So thank you on behalf of Gentian here. Until next week, stay safe, stay positive, and stay grateful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.